Hello and welcome to these Business Day Dialogues live in partnership with UNISA School of Business Leadership. I'm Jan Joseph. Great to be with you as always. We've been having the most interesting conversations in the last few weeks, and we're back with another one today, focusing on the youth of our country. Today we're looking at igniting conversation for youth entrepreneurs in the digital transformation industry. Now, we know entrepreneurs are simply going to become the lifeblood to building businesses in this country and growing our economy. We already know they contribute significantly to the national GDP. Digital entrepreneurship focuses on the creation of such businesses and the adoption of digital technologies by entrepreneurs. And the combination of the two holds great potential for how we ensure that we can ease the country's high unemployment levels, particularly among the youth. In South Africa, however, how do we ensure young entrepreneurs welcome, or rather overcome the many barriers to operating in the digital space? That's what we'll shortly explore with our panel. But first, we're going to bring this topic into sharper focus with Professor Walter Matley, Associate Professor of Digital Transformation and Innovation at UNISA SBL. Welcome to you, Prof. Good morning.
Thank you, Program Director Joanne Joseph. Good morning to our viewers. UNISA SBL has a rich history in academic excellence, and it has trained business leaders throughout the world for years. We offer cutting-edge business education through our programs. This includes our postgraduate diploma in business administration, our master's in business leadership, and our master's in business administration. We also have executive education and also our doctoral program. Our academics at UNISA SBL are dedicated to providing our students with analytical skills that are needed out there, professional network, and also a responsive that they need so that they'll be able to adapt, innovate, and anticipate change in the ever-changing world of work. By enrolling with us as UNISA SBL, you join the many influential leaders of South Africa across the continent and also across the world. As UNISA SBL, we're pleased to learn that our graduates are prominent in every sector of the economy, and our qualifications are widely recognized for the quality, relevance, and the impact that they have. When you look at our strategy as the UNISA SBL, our strategy is to achieve the unachievable. This is building around the niche goal from the UNISA mother body. So this is done through leveraging on innovation technology to create an enriching experience for our staff and students as they navigate through our Odell environment. That is why, again, as UNISA SBL, we are proud to be the first college to integrate innovation from the fourth and fifth industrial revolution to build on our digital teaching and learning capacities. When you look at our research, the SBL research plan is aligned with the UNISA mother body niche areas, and also our research areas, they tally with our South African NDP, National Development Plan 2030, your Africa Agenda 2063, and also the SDG. For that reason, we've identified the 4 focus areas which fortify our identity in the marketplace. This includes research on responsible leadership in practice, sustainable livelihood, intra-Africa trade and investment, and also the reason we are here, digital transformation and innovation. Ladies and gentlemen, the high level of youth unemployment with lack of digital access and also skills suggests that there's a cohort of young people who are greatly underrepresented among digital entrepreneurs. We are hopeful that this panel will engage in a meaningful manner that may pave policy suggestions. Program Director, I thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Professor. And of course, you're going to stay with us for the rest of this conversation. I want to introduce you now to the rest of the panel that will be unpacking this topic along with Professor Walter Matley. Mr. Saki Zamtlaka is CEO of GEP, the Gauteng Provincial Development Finance Institution. Mr. Amit Kumar is a digital transformation expert. Dr. Ayomikun Idou is Assistant Professor of Information Systems at the University of Sussex Business School, so joining us from quite far away today. Ms. Tebogo Rakhatla is a UNISA SBL alumna And of course, you've already been introduced to Professor Walter Muckley, who's an Associate Professor of Digital Transformation and Innovation at UNISA SBL. I welcome all of you this morning, and it's really lovely to be able to have this conversation with you today. And a reminder to our viewers as well that you can pose your own questions to the panel a little bit later on. All you do is make use of the live chat function. You can pose as many of those questions as you would like. Just tell us who you want to answer your question. I'll try to do my best at the end to make sure that I get through as many of those questions with the panel for you as possible. Right now, Amit, I want to kick off with you to just give us the lay of the land. When we talk about digital transformation, how is that actually defined and executed?
Thanks, Joanne, for the question, and good morning, everybody. I think digital transformation is about evolving and augmenting more than replacing human capabilities. It's about, if you look at the history of transformation, that the transformations that can evolve the culture to support the strategy are the ones that succeed. I like to look at it from an innovation perspective into like three most important dimensions. The one is when you are looking at a transformation as a business or as an entrepreneur in terms of a business or creating a business, you need to look at three models of it, which is a business model, a product innovation, and a process innovation. The other thing that I love to follow, which is a framework from BCG in digital transformation, it focuses on four key concepts of it. The first component asks how digital is actually changing the business strategy. So you look at a radio company, how is digital going to change the actual strategy in terms of the execution of it? The second component looks at how companies digitize the core. That means your essence as a business, what problem you're solving, why, how do you look at that, and you digitize that portion of it. The third component looks at the opportunities the companies have for new growth. So that involves, that going into a new market segment, expanding into bringing new products into the market, expanding into new regions. The fourth component looks at the other angles of the digital transformation, which involves the most important element, which is the people. So those are the four frameworks that digital transformation forms part of.
Thanks very much for that, Amit. Now that we have the lay of the land there, what are the barriers to digital employment or even learning for young people on our continent?
Thank you, Joanne. I think one of the barriers that young people experience is in terms of what we term as a digital divide, because we see digital technology kind of advancing at a very high rate in advanced countries, in developed countries. And we see one of the things is our IT policies are sort of deficient in terms of encouraging young people to go into digital work. We don't actually encourage. We have this kind of capricious mode policies where we just come up with policies that's actually in the digital transformation or in terms of employment, and that encourage young people to go into digital employment. For example, we could see in some African countries, in one of my research, what I discovered is when young people go into digital work or engage in digital employment, they are able to learn some skills in terms of human resource skills. They're able to learn even technical skills. They're able to upskill and able to reskill themselves because they're able to engage with international employers. They're able to learn new things. But what we see, and some of the benefit of actually engaging in digital employment is because it gives you this open access to a wide range of people and a wide range of opportunities in different countries. You're not restricted by geographical boundaries. And considering the economic situation and increasing population, increasing unemployment, and every year in our universities we keep pumping out graduates, and we don't have enough jobs for them. This is an opportunity for young people, but when we have policies that actually do not encourage young people to go into these areas, and especially I think we have more opportunities for people in IT and in business who can actually do their work. And we could see even with COVID, more people are working from home. And when we begin to encourage digital work in our universities, for example, in University of Sussex here, we actually have a model which is digital work, where we kind of encourage young people to go into digital work. What are the opportunities that are available for them? How can they get into digital work? So we're looking at some of the barriers of people getting into that is technology, of course, poverty. We have government policies, and also responsibility is also on our academics, our academic institutions. They need to encourage and begin to see, begin to encourage young people to go into digital employment, because this is actually a way to help the economy and also to contribute to the lives of the young people, because it's when unemployment keeps rising, it has a network effect on the whole economy.
I can't agree with you more there. I mean, I'm thinking of the institutions that currently exist, and I'm wondering, Walter, perhaps you can help us here by explaining to us exactly how tertiary institutions are aiming to integrate digital learning with all other subjects that are being taught at university at this point. Walter, are you able to hear me?
Thanks, Joanne. Just like we've started, the university looks at what are the latest technologies that they can use, they can integrate into our normal teaching and learning. How can they support teaching and learning in a way that it makes provision for students to learn beyond the classroom? This includes synchronous and asynchronous lessons for our students. And also, as we integrate new technologies, advanced technologies, we are also mindful of the digital divide that exists in terms of ICT infrastructure. That is why UNISA's got centers where students can bring their own device to connect. Those that have devices and those that don't have devices, we've got centers with which are equipped with ICT equipment for students not to be left behind. Thanks.
Tebogo, how do we go about bridging this digital divide? I mean, whose responsibility is it actually?
You know, Joanne, the whole world is no longer talking about fourth industrial revolution in the future. It is now. We're no longer migrating. As a result, the responsibility and the onus lies with everyone. Firstly, the government has got a mandate to create employment. And because of that, that should be their number one priority, to make it a point that we are aligning with what fourth industrial revolution is. And that migration is also without some of the hurdles that we are already experiencing. So apart from government, we've got the private sector and some of the NPOs as well. This calls for a collaboration of partnerships, because for us, forming part of the global economy, we cannot be left behind. Everyone needs to play a role in making sure that the transition within the fourth industrial revolution is happening. The challenge is that it has to happen with speed, because COVID has shown us that there is no longer going back. The digital divide can no longer be sustained anymore. We need to live in the now, and in the now is within the use of digitization. Thanks.
Saki, on this note, what is government doing to ensure this disparity is adequately addressed?
Thank you, Joanne, and thanks to Business Day and UNISA for this. For me, the big thing about this conversation is that I think government needs to learn a little bit more of what is it that entrepreneurs want and what are the changing trends, and in this case, what the youth are looking for. Because I think part of the challenge is that there's a lot of support that is put out there, but it's not put in a way that makes it acceptable to the people that need it the most. So a lot of what government can do, in my view, and we're trying to do in the province, is to provide support to entrepreneurs so we can fund a business. And we're trying, I mean, I keep saying on a lot of the public platforms I'm in, that when people say, what businesses do you fund? You know, what is the criteria? I always say to them, let's not start with the criteria. Tell us what your business idea is, tell us what it requires, and we can see how best to support and fund it. It may be that you need a business plan, it may be that you need funding for skills until you've developed the business to the level where it should be. It could be that you need market access. Now, that one is a little bit tricky because, I mean, with government, there's the Public Finance Management Act, and everything has to be transparent, so everyone must bid. But having said that, government can say we're prioritizing youth businesses. So let's say in digital, there's nothing that stops government in saying, you know, cyber security is going to be done by South African companies, and we will fund young people that can develop them, and then they will get those contracts from government. But the private sector, I mean, is also doing a lot with supplier development. And that is, you know, part of the compliance on Black economic empowerment initiatives. So we're seeing people who require working capital facilities on that. But in short, really, our role is to provide the support to entrepreneurs in this changing world, but also do it in a manner that makes sense. If you're going to try and finance an intellectual capital business on the basis of a balance sheet, you know, it's not going to be fundable because there's no tangible assets and hard assets to finance. It's intellectual capital. So really what we're trying to do, and that's why I was excited about this discussion, is to be part of conversations that are happening. We try and then structure ourselves to respond as best as possible. But we are there, and there's a few funds we've launched with partners. ITC is one of them. And then there are other private sector parties that we're working on. So we're also keen to see your pipeline and the other entrepreneurs on this chart to see how we can give that support. Thank you.
So just having a little bit of a problem with my camera at the moment, but I'm going to continue with the conversation so long as you can hear me. And I want you to comment on this, please. Something that Walter said a little bit earlier on occurred to me that, you know, there are universities, there are all sorts of bodies like government. Saki's given us really good examples of this, for example, where there are all sorts of bodies that are trying to tack on IT as part of their education, as part of the support that's required for many young entrepreneurs. Are we approaching this the right way, Ayo? Are we saying that we are primarily going to look at these projects through the prism, or this education through the prism of IT and digital development, technology and transformation? Or does IT tend to become a kind of an issue that we tack on at the end of having devised how we are going to go about these projects?
Thanks, Joanne. Yes, I think I agree with Walter, because when we're talking about youth employment in this century, in 2021, you need to youth employment and digital innovation and digital work. They all come together, and technology. They all come as a package deal, because you cannot remove one from each other. Even if gone are the days when you can have a business and not get involved in any form of IT if you want to have any measure of success. All you need, and I think just like Walter said, the world is changing. The world is changing, and everyone has to move with it. Businesses need data to make decisions. Individuals need data to know which business to go into, and we cannot remove one from each other. They are just like I said, they are a package deal. So when we're having conversation about youth employment, we need people who actually understand technology, because from my own research and from my own focus expertise in terms of youth employment and digital work, the traditional organizations don't have enough space for people. It doesn't have enough space to employ people. And the world is changing. The kind of organizations the startups that are springing up are not what it used to be before. You could start a startup in your room, and you sell for 200 million in a couple of years. But what we are my argument has been is, as Africans, we need to develop indigenous policies that actually targets our own specific circumstances, that target our unique environment, our unique culture. Because one of the things I have noticed is we tend to import policies, import research, import from Western countries that actually could work, but doesn't actually fit into the need of our environment. We need indigenous scholars. We need our educational institution to come up with ideas, to come up with policies that could actually that could actually promote digital work, which is my own focus in terms of my research. So when you're asking if we could separate, if the technology aspect could come at the end, and we could just focus on employment, I think that would be a misplaced judgment to just have a discussion on entrepreneurship, or have a discussion on the future of employment without integrating technology, or even putting technology at the core of it, because that's what is going to drive any form of transformation or development that we are looking for.
I tend to agree with you there, Ayo. Tell me, Amit, what sort of digital employment opportunities exist for youth in countries where access is a serious problem, as in South Africa and a few other countries on the continent?
Absolutely, Joanne. Thanks for the question, and I agree with the panelists. I think if you take a step back and if you think about this digital transformation and the impact of COVID on it, and you know what it has done, just from a company perspective first, like a lot of companies, and you initially mentioned about IT being something that's an afterthought. It's always been a cost center, and all of a sudden we had this everybody working from home, and you know we were pushed into transforming. You know, in March 2020, and things haven't been the same since then. And I think, like from an entrepreneurship perspective, or for young entrepreneurs to bank on this opportunity, the first thing that comes to my mind in terms of that is like good things always come from adversity. The greater the adversity, and the greater the opportunity to leap forward. And just on some of the stats that I've seen in terms of you know, being in the digital transformation industry and working in it to transform industries for the last 7 to 10 years, is that according to the African Development Bank, 22% of Africa's working age population are starting businesses. So the entrepreneurship rate that we have currently is the highest in the world. So we need to just take this to the next level. But that's in terms of the same stat, the 22%, the African Economic Outlook in 2017 stated that a lot of entrepreneurship, out of that 22%, 7% is a working age population or survival entrepreneurs. So you can call them from a they were pushed into being an entrepreneur, and that comes back to your question, which is, you know, the access to entrepreneurship, or the problems that they're facing are immense in terms of, you know, the unemployment or the underemployment. In terms of IDC, the prediction for the future by 2022 is that approximately 65% of the GDP will be digitalized. What do we mean by digitalized? That means that, you know, most of the stuff will be done through IT. So IT can no more be a cost center. And I think the competitive differentiation in the future, it means newer approaches to customer engagement, new ways of business process optimization, and the ability to just develop and deliver new products and services at a much faster pace. And I think as the young entrepreneur, as people in Africa that have been on the back foot for a very long time, we think we need to be leaders, and we need to know that leaders don't wait for a new normal. We build it.
Yeah, I'm quite heartened by that figure you've given us there, Amit, as to how many young people in Africa are launching digital businesses. Walter, you are in touch on a daily basis with some of these fine young minds. Are there good examples of how young people are taking advantage of technology to create entrepreneurial opportunities for themselves, even a side hustle, if you like?
Thanks, Joanne. Yes, young people are creating opportunities for themselves in a form of freelancing, side hustle, working 2 or 3 jobs. However, what is important is for government. Government can create jobs, yes, but government can do so much. So what is important is for government to create enabling environment for young people to try other things. I mean, if infrastructure is provided, some of those ideas that young people have in communities that are underserviced, they are able to therefore take opportunities in jobs that requires infrastructure such as your ICT infrastructure. For example, look at the work done by influencers. They are able to make a living and support their families. However, for them to do that, they rely heavily on the ICT infrastructure to do that. Thanks, John.
Thanks, Walter. Tebogo, you're quite an experienced professional who's straddled many professions concurrently. I'm wondering whether the right connections are being made by young people. Do they have the knowledge to be able to marry the landscape to what they could provide and make a decent business out of? So, for example, are they aware that there's now a trade deal that's been struck in Africa that opens up all sorts of opportunities to them? And is it possible for them to then look at that and say, well, here's a niche that I could find, that I could slip into quite easily and build a business from, for example?
You know, the digital divide, Johan, it's a real thing. Yes, there are those that are exposed, that are sitting with information, relevant information as to which direction to go, but there are those that are being left behind. So there is a lot of lack of relevant skills within the digitization, as professors already said, and you know, ICT infrastructure, it's a big deal. There is lack thereof. Also, the cost of capital of having to set up all this infrastructure, it's of big concern. And I think the one other thing is the lack or the slow buy-in by all other stakeholders. As a result, we find that our youth are so disadvantaged when it comes to that. And you can see that if there was more focus to be put on this matter, a lot of the young people, their lives will be impacted positively, because as Prof has already mentioned, an example of your influencers, your social media entrepreneurs, they have taken this and they are running with it. But those are the people who are more on the privileged side. What about the rest that have been left behind? So that is something that we need to look into. Thanks, Joanne.
Saki, thanks, Tebogo. Saki, do you agree that the stakeholders in this process have been a little bit slow in mobilizing these projects that could encourage young people to become involved as digital entrepreneurs, but also to be able to make the connections for them in areas where they might be a little bit handicapped in terms of access to information, for example?
So, Joanne, I think something is missing, that without a doubt, but I'm beginning to question, where the gap is, and I'll say why. South Africa has, at the height of our economic performance, I don't know what the numbers are because equities have taken a bit of a knock, but we had, as the country, about 9-10 trillion of assets under management. That's financial assets. That's the money that's available. We have the PIC, which has been investing about 2 trillion into the economy of pensioners' money that they manage. We have, development finance institutions, which at times are not financing as much as they should. And almost every time you speak to entrepreneurs, there is a view that there is a lack. Even in skills, why is South Africa not having unicorns in ICT as the US has? Even in the US, it's not everyone who's a tech billionaire, but there are those businesses that can be scaled up and can be put at a level where they are big and they can change things. Because, let's just look at Apple, Tesla. Once you build businesses that big, Google, you then create an ecosystem that can support them. So for me, I don't think the disjuncture is even only on those who have no access to digitization. Yes, that's a big challenge, but I think even the people who have access to digitization and information are not doing much. If us in this room who are supposed to have all this access, asking questions, for me, that's where the real problem is, because ideally in this room, this is where we should be saying, well, there's 10 entrepreneurs who have these ideas and they're battling with funding, and I can say, okay, this is what we can do. So I think there is a sense where we're not pushing hard enough to get to where we need to be. And I know this sounds a bit bad. I mean, I've been an entrepreneur myself. We started a stock exchange, and I was full-time in the business before I came. And there is really, I think, a challenge of money available and people not accessing it. Yes, government has made it a lot more difficult. Risk culture in South Africa is a little bit more difficult. But I think we're not pushing hard enough. I mean, I met with the African Development Bank a couple of years ago, and they were saying, their ticket size starts at about $30 million. And they were saying they're not finding deals in South Africa of people who are applying to them and who are looking for those kinds of checks. So if, businesses that are looking for less than $1 million, there's a lot of them. And I think the Western Cape, for example, has positioned itself at least as a brand, as where they're looking at ICTs. So Stellenbosch is starting to be a little bit of an ecosystem for tech entrepreneurs. But we know Gauteng is the biggest economy in the country. And why is it that we don't have a proper ecosystem for tech entrepreneurs? So I'm saying, yes, government, there are challenges, and that's why we need to have these conversations. But we often, at least from what I see, we often don't hear a lot of the answers on people saying, this is what we want to do, but this is where, we're not getting support. Some of the ideas may not be as developed. And yes, some of the ideas may meet people on the other side who are not willing to listen and are not open-minded. Yes, we are a conservative society. And maybe last point, I mean, I always say, part of the challenge also with development finance institutions, we effectively venture capital entities, and it comes with a bit of a risk. South Africans are very risk averse. When development finance institutions lose money, people focus on the deals that have gone wrong and not the deals that have gone right. And we've also got to, yes, hold people accountable, but accept that if we do entrepreneurship funding, the rule of thumb is that 3 out of 10 succeed. But the 3 pays off. It's what lifts everybody up. It's what creates the scale and everything else that needs to be done. So while there are challenges, I think we've allowed ourselves to be at a point of comfort where we complain about things even where there's opportunity for us to offer solutions. Thank you.
Saki, you've raised so many interesting points there. I want to pick up on one important aspect, first of all, and Ayo, perhaps I can pick up with you, because Saki's speaking about creating a conducive environment, but he's also talking about the immense amount of collaboration that's needed for all of this to come off and for young people to enter this digital entrepreneurship space en masse in the way we would like to see, so that there is a significant effect, a positive effect on the economy. Why are people not talking to each other, Ayo?
Thanks, John. Yeah, I think for you to collaborate with someone else, or for you to build networks to create this big idea and to get funding, to get funded by these institutions, you need to have something of value you're bringing to the table in the first place. Because number one, you have to, maybe it is skill, maybe it is your connections, or whatever you're bringing to the table. You need to bring something of value, and that is what we have seen with a lot of young companies, maybe young entrepreneurs. There is no real value that people can actually invest in. You could come up with, I want to build the next Instagram. Okay, there is what is the value proposition? What exactly are you proposing? What is different? What is different? But because a lot of people have the ideas, but what is the value of the idea that investors can actually put their money in? We've seen examples with tech companies in Nigeria, for example. We have companies like Paystack that started small and they built over the years, and I think they were valued at about $200 million a couple of months ago. So it is a gradual, number one, it's a gradual process. And when people see the value in the product that you have or in the service you're rendering, then they can come in and be, there's a way we can complement what you have. There's a way to scale up this idea you have. I think Saki actually touched a lot on that, because when you don't have anything of value you're actually putting out, nobody wants to be involved, and also the scale with which your idea and how scalable is the idea. if it is an idea that can only work in your local territory, that is entrepreneurship. But sometimes we have ideas that are only meant for this local area, that it will do well in your local area, but it's never scalable. So nobody's coming on to pick on that idea. So you need to be able to know the limit of the ideas that you have. And also we need education. People need to know the opportunities available to them. I, for example, I didn't know it for a couple of years until I actually moved to the UK. I didn't know kinds of funding available for different entrepreneurial ideas and things like that. We need to be able to educate people on the opportunities that are available. And when we are looking at government, I'm not really someone that kind of preach or kind of advocate for government involvement in a lot of things, because from evidence of some of the things we've seen, when government get involved in a lot of creative spaces, they kind of stifle ideas and they kind of messes up a little bit with some of their policies, because most times they are only focused on taxation. They are only focused on what is the political benefit of it. And we've seen examples of things like that. We've seen creative industries in Nigeria and in some other countries that when government is not involved, they prosper. They actually do well. We've seen examples of that in the tech industry in Nigeria and also in Kenya. Why we need a government to create a kind of a conducive environment for entrepreneurs to boom. We need, to a certain extent, for government to leave people alone to develop their ideas, because people have been able to recognize that some of these policies, the implementation is actually poor. We've seen something about the African free trade agreements, and the implementation is so poor that nobody is actually implementing anything. They are there on paper, but do they actually work in practice? So some of these things, some of the limitations that young people will experience. We look at the bureaucracy in government offices. If you want to start a business, I think I stumbled upon a study and in one of my research about South Africa having the lowest informal economy in sub-Saharan Africa, which is quite extremely low by distance compared to other developing countries. Because South Africa is actually on when we look at developing countries, kind of in terms of your GDP, it's kind of on the higher scale compared to other countries. But you have a kind of a smaller percentage of informal economy compared to countries like Ghana and even some countries in Southeast. Kind of encourage entrepreneurship as part of our daily culture. We kind of encourage informal economy. Most of these ideas, most of these companies, most of these technology startups, they come up as informal and then they can build up to become maybe and fit into the formal economy. But when we don't have a culture of informal businesses, like a large informal business, I think in Nigeria they have about 70%, in Ghana about the same rate, and in some countries we are having about 90% almost. So when the culture of entrepreneurship is ingrained in a society, we can see more ideas springing up compared to when a lot of people are more focused on the formal economy. So yeah, I think those are what you said, limitations. Yeah.
That interests me very much, what you say. I mean, you've also picked on a few interesting points there that I'd like to expand a little bit on. And something that Saki mentioned as well is the kind of risk averseness that exists in funding these businesses. Amit, on the one hand, you've got governments all over the continent saying in theory, or paying lip service to the fact that they are committed to this digital revolution, to 4IR, that they want to be a part of the progress and the advancement in this area. They want their populations to participate in that, particularly their young people. And yet, we're not seeing adequate support. We're not seeing adequate finance. Why would governments or other stakeholders, for that matter, even the corporates in South Africa who can afford to fund these sorts of businesses and startups, why is there such an averseness to taking on projects like this and saying, well, we try them out, We're entering a new era. If they fail, or we tweak the idea, but we're still going to invest in them anyway.
Yeah, and thanks, Joanne. And I think like the short answer to that question is definitely the skills. It is the lack of skills that's the problem that we face. But I think I will ride on the wave of positivity that Saki brought earlier in terms of, the funding is there, the funding is available, not just from the government, but we know of venture capitalists in the country. It's not exactly as great as a Silicon Valley or what it would be at IO would know in the UK, but it is still there. There are venture capitalists in the country that have invested in companies like Naked and Control, millions and millions of dollars, right? So there is funding available. There are opportunities out there, but you need to get to the point where you can access funding. So for a startup to go to a venture capitalist, that has that funding, you need to be a turnover of say 100,000 rands annual recurring revenue. And I mean, that's a lot of money we're talking about from a startup perspective, right? And if you don't have the right skills, or if you're not coming up with an Instagram or a Facebook, it's very complicated for you to scale up to that level, right? So we need to understand first from a skill perspective where we are. And what I mentioned in terms of the lack in terms of the value proposition, that is true as well. I think like from a problem perspective, if you think about it, just to highlight one simple thing, the entire Africa, around 48% of Africa doesn't have access to internet. I mean, internet is a very simple commodity. Without internet, we can't talk about digitization, digital transformation, entrepreneurship, anything at all. How do we fix that first, before we start about a skills shortage of the country, right? So that's from a government, big corporate, that's a problem we need to fix. From an internet perspective, access to internet perspective, it needs to be a commodity. It needs to be something as simple as WhatsApp. Now, when it gets to skills from a perspective of entrepreneurship from a young student or someone that's aspiring, that's going to be the future one day, I think like it needs to start, and I hope they're listening to this live session. I think needs to start from a mindset perspective. I think they need to speak to IO value proposition. They need to focus on the values. They need to create something bigger than, just creating or solving a small problem. Richard Branson, I read it last weekend in one of his newsletters. He said that the best time to go into a new business is when it's, being run badly by others. And I mean, there's a lot of businesses in South Africa that's been run badly by a lot of people, and that means opportunity. And I just want to say that when you are building something, build it to solve, a unique problem, and embrace the customer's empathy, and create a culture of innovation, experimentation, and simplicity. And from a preparation perspective, like how do you get there? What skills do you need? And we live in a beautiful time, in my opinion. I think from a skills perspective, you can go to Google digital skills, and everything that's on there is for free. I mean, you can go to YouTube and you can learn, once you have the access to the internet, anything that you would like. And I would say that one thing for me, or industry for me in the digital transformation era that will thrive is the data analytics and machine learning. So I would promote people to focus on that, to create value propositions inside data analytics and machine learning. And there are plenty of courses out there on Google, Microsoft, or someone like UNISA, and Professor will guide you more about it. Seek a mentor, before building an organization. If you want to go to Saki for a business plan, get someone that has done that before, build that before executing on that idea that you got. Write a proper business plan, get the mentor to help you with it. And I think most important is start somewhere. And if you want to start it, start now.
That's great advice, Amit. I mean, but my worry is that the kind of constraints that are placed on our young people right now without access to the internet, and without access to digital learning within the school environment, for example, present their own kinds of challenges. Tebogo, perhaps you can enlighten us here. It seems to me that you're never going to be able to put that young person with a brilliant creative idea in contact with that angel investor or whomever it is who's going to make it a reality from a financial point of view, unless you close that gap between the two. How do we go about doing that, Tebogo?
And I think this is where Saki comes in. Whether we like it or not, government needs to play a role. It is its mandate to make sure that business prospers, that the youth get employed, and that we as a country, our GDP, grows. So this is where government needs to come in. I know that there are institutions or agencies that government has set up. SACIS is one. We've got the NYDA as one of the examples. Those are the institutions that need to go out there. I always say that they need to go to Hamadulas, find a way to reach the communities out there, share information, educate them, and come up with skills programs that they are going to let these communities tap into, because without that, there's absolutely nowhere where we're going to go. Those communities are going to be left out. Private sector, I know that there are those private sector organizations that have already started tapping into this through the enterprise development programs. But the question we need to ask, is that enough? We can see that is not enough. So a whole lot of other institutions needs to come through. Yes, education, formal education is one way to bridge this gap. But also, as Amit has already highlighted, there are also other informal institutions that people can tap into in order to upskill. But the main thing is that government needs to facilitate that collaboration. They need to steer this, because whether we like it or not, even the private sector, they operate within the mandate of the government, using policies set up by the government, legislation set up by the government. So they cannot operate as an island. Yes, to tap into some of these informal institutions that provide skilling, it can only take us so far. But is it going to alleviate the crux of the challenges that we're sitting with? No, it will not. So we need to find ways to collaborate partnerships. And by collaborating those partnerships, we highlight the core areas that we need to focus on when it comes to digitization. Thanks, Jo.
Well, thank you for that. I want to actually open the floor now to questions from our audience, because they've raised some really important issues here. A question from Zach. And Walter, I will put this question to you, given that you are deeply steeped in this education in our country. Given South Africa's glaring lack of skills and poor education, especially in terms of maths and science, could this obsessive pursuit of digitization inadvertently expand the digital divide, especially in the youth? And it's such a good question, because of course it's not just a nation of young South Africans that is disadvantaged. There is a massive disparity between young people within our country. Walter?
Thanks, John, for your question. The adoption of new technologies have ways of creating new forms of divide. We may look at divide as the one having access to, the other one of having not access to. However, the more we move with the latest technologies, we are creating new forms of divide for our society. And it also goes back to the role that all the stakeholders need to play, not only government. For an example, when we look at a business situation, for me as an entrepreneur, it may be viable for me to create, to invest or to create a business that focuses on ICT infrastructure in urban areas. Definitely, I'm going to get my returns. But what about those in rural communities? Government needs to create policies that attract your private sectors to also create infrastructure in those areas, so that those people are not left behind. There's a necessity to re-engineer the policies around there. Perhaps put some incentive for private companies that can invest in those remote areas. Thanks.
Thanks, Walter. Staki, the next one is definitely coming at you. Leslie Antane was listening to Zach's comment and question and said, "Hi, Zach, your question is very good. We as Swift Learning Academy are currently developing an app addressing the lack of skills and poor education in STEM courses and digital skills. We, however, need assistance and support from the private sector and government in order to bring this EdTech platform to fruition. Perhaps Mr. Saki from GEP can help us with shedding some light on how we can make a presentation to this department. So it's a very specific request, Saki, but we could even talk a little bit more generally about this. How open is the GEP to exploring ideas like this with existing businesses that are helping with skills transfer and development? And are you working closely with the private sector as well in order to make this work?
No, definitely, Joanne, we are. So the individual can apply to us. You can go to our website, gep.co.za, and apply, because it's either financial or non-financial support that they're looking for. So you can apply, or you can give them my email address and they can send me an email for us to have the conversation. And for me, I think what Amit and Ayo are saying is exactly that. Let's have something on the table to talk about. Let's see if what's on the table has value, and then we can take it up. Even if it is not GEP, we can link them up with other entities that have money. And for me, I mean, where I started, Tebuko, I mean, we talk about government. Government is actually us. We are taxpayers. We have platforms to influence things that needs to be done. And we're sitting on a platform, you know, convened by a university that has a school of business leadership. And we're talking about skills. And I'm saying, you know, in the platforms we have, has SBL done enough to create entrepreneurs or business leaders that can have businesses that are funded? I mean, if you look, let's say you go to the US, MIT, Harvard, you know, and some universities, and maybe California, they've come so close to business that if you at, you know, California University and they're working with Google and you have an idea, a lot of venture capitalists will want to listen to it because they believe that the education that you got and the links that you have in business have made you to be ready to be funded. And I think for me, those are the questions we need to have on, are we doing enough with the influence we have and in the places that we're in? I mean, I see a lot of entrepreneurs who are people who worked at a certain point and went out on their own. That's what I had done, because I mean, even outside of South Africa, a lot of entrepreneurs who really make it big outside of the outliers and the exceptions. A lot of it are people who are in their mid-30s and mid-40s. They have experience, they've built networks, they have seen where there's a gap, they can add value. And when they go and look for money, at least they also have a little bit more confidence on what it is that they can offer and are looking for. So what I'm then challenging is that let's all use what we have to put something on the table. The problems are never going to end. I mean, everywhere in the world there's a problem, but if you can find a solution to it, and it's something else if you then complain and say, I went to this institution and I didn't get help. And that's what we get paid to do. So my role is to try and resolve those problems. So it's a call I'm making that, yes, the problems are many and we know them, but in almost all the places that we're in, we have some level of influence. And what are we doing to change things where we are? Thank you.
Thank you for that, Saki. I just want to remind our viewers of that email address, gep.co.za, for those of you who would like to approach this government body in order to talk about the possibility of having your business funded. I'm going to move on to you now, Ayo. I'm going to ask all our panel members to keep their responses really short now as we're coming to the end of our discussion. This is a question from Hunadi Ayo, who says, on the digital divide, South Africa has a substantial number of informal traders. They too play a crucial role in growing the economy and just ensuring basic sustenance for their families. How can institutions of higher learning ensure that informal traders are not left behind in the fast-paced digital era? How can governments also assist informal traders to move into this digital era? Ayo?
Yeah, moving into the digital transformation or into the digital era is not something it's something that is gradual. The people have to see the need for it. There needs to be the technology needs to be accessible. You can't tell someone who a trader to accept ATM as sort of payment when he knows it's going to take a while or there's going to be network problems for him for the trader to get for customers to use ATM. The technology needs to be accessible, it needs to be reliable, and it needs to be cheap. And the infrastructure needs to be there to enable traders or people in the informal economy to embrace it. If you can't force it on people, they need to see the need for it, and they need to know it is accessible. It will not disrupt their normal business activities, because if I can sell my product and I can get cash, why should I can get cash and it's easy for me to get it? Why should I spend more time dealing with a technology when I can get an easier analog option? So it needs to be accessible for it needs to be accessible. It needs the customer. You need to it has to offer value to the traders themselves. So that's the way you can encourage it. The environment, the technology landscape needs to actually enable traders to adopt it. So it's not something we can develop a policy or we want to encourage, but if the technology is there, we can then encourage people that, this is the benefits of adopting this technology.
Amit, a question for you from Joshi, who says, what are some of the jobs of the future that digitization will create? What sort of work will our children be doing in 20 years? I find that a really interesting question.
20 years, considering what we saw last year, I think I can't actually think of that. But I heard this at one of the event that I went to a couple of years ago, and it spoke about how our kids will have or kids that will be 20 years old in the future will have something called free digital, where the physical and the digital landscape will be the same for them. And I've personally actually started to see the kids right now, like, because they don't actually understand that meeting in person and sending a message on WhatsApp or having a video call is two different things. And I feel that from a job perspective, it's definitely going to be somewhere in artificial intelligence, maybe also in quantum computing. Quantum computing, obviously, it's still around a decade or two in the future. So I think, maybe artificial intelligence, machine learning, data analytics. Those are the jobs of the immediate future. Will be in the next 3 to 5 years in South Africa, and I think in the upcoming future, in a decade or so, and maybe in 20 years, we will be looking more, smart cities, probably flying cars, hopefully, and then also looking at quantum computing. I think that's my bet, at least in my personal opinion.
Thanks very much for that, Amit. We're all curious to know what our children are going to be doing in the next few decades. I want to close with this question, Tebogo, which I'm going to put to you. It's from Hussein, and Hussein says, I'm wondering how government policies and processes enable the flexibility required. Sometimes it sounds too onerous, and the various government departments or sections are not talking effectively to one another. I believe our issues are more systemic. The public service tends to come up with great initiatives and at the same time put on regulations that stifle the same great initiatives. In the same breath, I appreciate that there's a culture of accountability that needs to be cultivated, seeing that in most cases, people take advantage of such and act with corruption. I mean, that's very much it's very much a worry in our society, the fact that, the money doesn't go where it's required, or that, on the one hand, government gives with the one hand, or perhaps business even, or civil society where it's involved in these initiatives. They give with one hand, they take away with the other, and make it very, very difficult for youngsters to actually launch into careers in these areas.
Joanne, I've heard a saying that it is a cancer. What you have just described, it is a cancer. But we must say that cancer is curable now. There are a lot of people that have been cured. So do we have hope? Is there hope? Of course there is. Hope that is going to be enforced. Government, as much as things are not going the way we want them to, or with the speed that we want them to, we are living in a digital age. We are forced to align with the digital age. So government cannot just sit around, and we cannot just give up and say, no, there is so much of wrongdoing that is happening. I just appreciate what Saki has just mentioned previously, that they are there, and we need to start sitting amongst ourselves in such panels to say, how can we go forward without really focusing on more on the negatives and saying, this is the platform whereby we need to come up with strategies to move forward. So I really believe that there is hope, because this one, we are forced to live within the digital age. There is no going back. So government, all other stakeholders are going to have to come on board to let us be in this age of the fourth industrial revolution. It's no longer in the past, we are living in it. Thank you, Joanne.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you to our wider panel as well. I think, if anything, this discussion has just shown us there's a huge responsibility we have towards the youth in our country to help them gain not just a national, but an international footing in the world of digital entrepreneurship. It is possible. I hope this discussion has shed some light on overcoming those barriers, or even just the discussions that we need to have with a view to removing those barriers and equipping our young people with the idea of what areas of enterprise they can expand out into and what they can explore. Thank you to our panel members for their expertise. Thank you to you, our viewers, as always, for watching these Business Day Dialogues live in partnership with UNISA SBL, and for contributing with your questions. It's been great being with you, as always. From me, Joanne Joseph, and the team, goodbye. Take care.